and today we're going to be discussing The Sky Is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. It's the beautiful UK cover of the book, which makes me really happy. I'm not a really big fan of the US cover. It's got like a weird apple on it. I don't know what it is about contemporary books. They're always just more appealing to me when they're simple, but they've got really beautiful text on them. I'm drawn to it. The Sky Is Everywhere is about a girl named Lenny Walker who pretty much lived a decent life in her Californian town. She had a best friend who was her older sister. They got along very well, but she always felt like she was kind of in her older sister's shadow. She didn't really mind it all that much because her older sister was fantastic. Then in the middle of a rehearsal of Romeo and Juliet, her older sister drops dead. The entire book is just about Lenny trying to deal with all of her grief and also trying to deal with it with two different boys. Mostly a book about overcoming tragedy, dealing with emotions, and it's just heart-wrenching as usual for Jandy Nelson. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars and about a 94% on my scale. I loved it. I've been on a little bit of a contemporary kick lately, and when I say contemporary kick, I mean the last 3 books. The only 3 books that I've read this year have been contemporary. I did blue eyeshadow today. The book is blue, so I wanted to match the book. Fell in love with Jandy Nelson's writing style. There's just something absolutely gorgeous about it. The metaphors are very intense and beautiful, and it really helps you connect with the emotion levels that the characters are feeling. The metaphors are super intense because the characters are feeling so intensely. One of the other things that I love about Jandy Nelson's writing is that she's able to create very believable and very well-written characters. They're the kind of characters that feel very real. There's nothing too over the top about them, and they're really quirky. Her grandma and her uncle, they both had their own quirks, and I could very easily see them while I was reading the book. Jandy Nelson also does an absolutely amazing job of developing emotional scenes. I am not a big book crier, but every time there was an emotional scene in these books, I teared up, like, a lot. I have never almost cried so much reading a book. Like, seriously, every few pages there was just another scene that I was like, if you're looking for an emotional read, pick up one of Jandy Nelson's books. They're all extremely emotional, very well written. Every chapter or so was paired with a poem that the main character wrote. These poems were so unbelievably raw and emotional. It helps the reader get more into the head of the main character. Again, it just helps develop the emotional sense of the book, and so all of these poems just had me nearly in tears. There were only a few things that I wasn't super big fan of when I was reading it, and that's why I didn't give it like a perfect 5 out of 5 stars. It was up there. It was a very good contemporary. In general, I don't vibe with love triangles. It kind of frustrates me. There was also a lot of lack of communication that caused a good deal of problems in the book. And again, that's another trope that I'm not a huge fan of. The plot device of miscommunication is overused in a lot of books and film. People in real life tell each other things. That is the end of the non-spoiler section. If you have not read this book, I would suggest that you go, you read it, and you come back so we can discuss it because it is a highly emotional and wonderful read. The love triangle was absolutely infuriating to me. Rationally, very clearly, from an outsider's perspective, one of the guys had better things to offer than the other. Joe very clearly offered more in the way of making her happy. Irrationally and emotionally, I know why she was drawn to Toby. It was easier for Toby and her to just sit and wallow together rather than try to move on and be healthy with other people. Relationships born out of grief never really end up working in the long run. Reading it from an outsider's perspective, not in the grief, I was like, Toby is very clearly a toxic person for you. Go away. Emotionally, she wanted to have somebody who could share in the grief. In her mind, no one else understood the feeling that she was feeling, when in reality, her grandma and Big were feeling the exact same way. In books, when an older character dies, yeah, it is upsetting, but when someone younger dies, it's completely out of the blue because you expect young people to live forever. We expect them to make it to their old age. We don't expect young people to be able to die when they're young because that's just not how it's supposed to work. You know, it's just not how we see the world as working. When her sister died, her entire worldview collapsed. Her sister was invincible. Her sister was everything. Suddenly she wasn't. I liked Joe. It also kind of came out of nowhere. They talked to each other at school. All of a sudden he just shows up to her house one day and they never explain how he figured out where her house was. They were always just kind of like, oh yeah, Joe's here now. How did he figure out where she lived? That's just a little weird. You just show up at your house and be like, hey girl, I've only talked to you 3 times. I'm gonna bring your family like bagels and let's go play music on the porch. I was picturing Toby, this is gonna sound so dumb, but as the rich skateboarder dude from Big Hero 6. Not an accurate depiction, but that was just who I saw. The place that I work at gets really, really slow sometimes, and there's nothing to do when it's slow, so I always bring a book with me to work. In the slow times, I would just sit there like thumbing through the pages so quickly because I was dying to know what was gonna happen next. The issue was that there were a lot of sad parts in it, so I'd be sitting at work flipping through, almost crying, and I was like,
can't do this, my coworker's right there.
Whenever an author can pull such emotion out of me as a reader, it's a job well done. But God, it was just so heavy. Toby. It was just laden with grief. It's just so palpable in the language. You know, her grief is just so evident in everything that she says. She was able to lose herself with both of the love interests. She was able to lose herself in grief with Toby, but lose herself in music and possibility with Joe. That was what really showcased who she should be with. Sure, going through grief with people who are also grief-stricken can be helpful in the healing process, but ultimately, if you're going to form a relationship based on grief, there's no way for that to grow into anything else. The relationship with Joe is just full of possibility. I was really happy that in the end she did pick him. There were so many things that leading up to it, I was like, just pick it, stop kissing Toby. Again, I absolutely adored the characters in this book. I felt like Big and Graham were just so wonderfully compelling. I adore young adult books that really focus heavily on relationships between guardian figures and children. Too often in young adult books do I find that the teenager like hates their parents because they don't know anything. The parents are non-existent, but here Big and Graham were absolutely essential. I loved all of their little quirks. I loved that Big smoked weed all the time, had like 6 marriages. Graham never stopped painting the green women. It was heart-wrenching when we discovered that the woman she was painting was her daughter. The fact that their mom could abandon them with little to no anguish about it, just left. Jandy Nelson is just so good at making me feel so many things. It was like a roller coaster. It was phenomenal. If you haven't read either of Jandy Nelson's books, I highly recommend that you pick one or the other up, or both. Pick it up for the prose alone. She is a gifted writer. It conveys all of the emotions of the scenes so well. Everything is so heightened. I felt it like I was experiencing the scenes myself. If you have read this book, tell me down below in the comments and we can discuss it. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm Maddie. I'll see you next time. Bye!